Well, I know a certain gentleman called Jim who works on the underground and should be watching right now. He's a big fan of the Pet Shop Boys, I've been told. And so I hope he's got time to take a tea break now with Pat. Hello, lads. And enjoy the last in the present series of Books by My Bedside because the special guest is Neil Tennant.
We get too sidetracked.
Like I say,
I
it's
mean,
gonna
we can, I mean, from my point of view, I don't have to sort of think about the book. And I said, let's go through that. Good evening. The Pet Shop Boys were one of the most successful pop phenomena of the 1980s, a duo with the rare distinction of having had more records in the charts than any other duo since the Everly Brothers. With 15 hit singles, only Madonna had more #1 hits than them in the 80s. More than that, their musical skills as writers and arrangers have worked wonders with singers as different as Dusty Springfield and Liza Minnelli. They've also collaborated with the film director Derek Jarman. One half of this internationally famous duo was born in Newcastle 36 years ago, and in 1984 was still a pop journalist with smash hits. Things have turned out rather differently since then for Neil Tennant. Welcome to the programme, Neil.
Hello.
It didn't really start for you until you were 30, so no teenage wonder.
No, it was a long time coming. It's funny because I started writing songs when I was about 12 years old, and then I met Chris Lowe and we started the Pet Shop Boys in about 1981. And so by the time we actually had any kind of success, we'd been writing songs for many years, and so we really had a backlog of songs which we've always been able to rely on, and also we kind of practiced our craft or whatever, if you like.
But therefore you have had 6 years. It's a long time at the very top.
Yes, it's passed very quickly though.
It passed quickly, but they are long, long tours and that sort of thing. You always hear Life on the Road. It sounds rather tedious. Do you have time for reading on those?
Yes, we haven't done a lot of touring. We did a tour last year, and we'll probably do one next year. And we do promotional tours where you go and do interviews and stuff with people. Yes, I always take books with me. It's quite important because when you're in an aeroplane or in a hotel room or even backstage somewhere, it's good to have something to read because it helps you somehow to keep more rooted in reality, I think, to just be able to read about something else than what you're doing.
But it doesn't get up your nose that the public perception of pop stars, rather like sportsmen, is those sort of people who can only read with their lips moving.
Yes, I read an interview recently with Muriel Gray, the TV presenter, and she said it was very boring interviewing pop stars because none of them have a brain. And I think that probably is a common perception. I don't think it's necessarily true. I mean, it's no truer than any other field, probably.
Well, you've got 5 books you're currently into. Can you take us to the first one?
Yes, the first one I've chosen is Testimony, which is the memoirs of the Russian composer Shostakovich. I've always been interested in Russian history and the revolution and post-revolutionary history since I was a boy, and I picked up this book one day, and it's a fascinating and controversial look at what it was like to be an artist of any kind in Russia under the Stalinist period, and the fear that people went through. Shostakovich, who was probably the greatest symphonic composer of any country in this century, was also had to be a sort of official composer to the Soviet Union, and therefore his work developed a kind of secret agenda. So he would supposedly be writing a symphony about, say, the 1905 revolution in Russia for its anniversary, but really he's writing about the 1956 Budapest uprising, which the Soviet Union had crushed. So he had this double life as an official composer of the Soviet Union, but also he was very true to himself, and he had his own agenda about what he wanted to write music about.
I mean, had you very much been influenced by his music earlier? Did you come to it,
No,
the book about the music, or
I'd never listened to any of his music until I read this book, and since then I've really become very interested in it, indeed, and it's very moving music, and the more you learn about it and his life and the life of people in the Soviet Union, you can hear it. The sufferings of people under the Stalinist regime in Russia really comes out in the music of Shostakovich.
I mean, do you get the double agenda by listening to the music? Have you heard that, read that?
Yes, you can, because simply some of the music is so incredibly tragic and sad. And Shostakovich, you read in this book, is writing music in the 1930s at a time when he and his friends expect at any moment to be arrested by the secret police. It was quite a common thing in the 1930s for Russian intellectuals, poets and playwrights and musicians to, they always had a bag packed by their bed when they went to bed, because you always got arrested in the middle of the night. And what comes out of the book is the astonishing fear that people have lived under and the humiliation that they lived under this regime. When after the war, they had a musical conference, and Shostakovich was denounced as a formalist, which is kind of a general term of abuse. And his works were stopped from being performed in the Soviet Union. And just after that, Stalin phoned up Shostakovich and demanded that he went to America to represent Russia in some international peace conference, because he was still a very prestigious figure. And so Shostakovich had to humiliate himself by going to America, and of course surrounded by secret police agents and all the rest of it, and has to defend the Soviet line, which is something that at that moment is persecuting him. So people went through these terrible humiliations and fear. And at the same time, of course, people would develop this very Russian sardonic humor, which again you can hear in Shostakovich's music, this kind of humor of survival.
But Neil, Shostakovich died pre-Glasnost. I mean, how did the book come out? How did the book work?
The way the book was done was that a musicologist called Solomon Volkov interviewed him, and he smuggled this out of Russia towards the end of the 70s. When the book was published, typically there was an outcry saying that it was a forgery, that this couldn't possibly be the memoirs of Shostakovich, that Shostakovich was a loyal communist, and that sort of thing. But gradually his son said it was true, his friends and associates said it was true, and it's now, having been very controversial, regarded as an authentic memoir of Shostakovich.
Do you think that having got into Shostakovich is going to have an influence on your music?
It's very difficult. I've always listened to a lot of classical music or orchestral music. It's very difficult and almost dangerous actually for orchestral music to influence pop music, because the result can just be something rather pretentious, as I think we saw in the late 60s or in progressive rock or something. So we have songs in our latest album. There's a couple of songs. There's a song called My October Symphony, which is directly influenced by the subject matter of supposing Shostakovich was still alive. What would you think now about his October Symphony commemorating the October Revolution, where in the Glasnost era, when the role of the Communist Party seems to be collapsing, and the achievements of the Russian Revolution are in doubt at any rate. And so it sort of looks at that. But at the same time, it's in pop music, you can be very ambitious, but you've got to be careful it doesn't just lapse into kind of mere pretentiousness. So, and also musically, Shostakovich was a brilliant orchestral writer and composer. In pop music, you don't really write on that kind of level, I don't think.
Neil, your second book?
Well, the second book was, having read this testimony book, a new book came out this year by Ian MacDonald called The New Shostakovich. Once this testimony book had come out, the whole of Shostakovich's music was really up for reinterpretation. What people thought his Seventh Symphony was about the invasion of Germany. It was called the Leningrad Symphony, the invasion by Germany of Russia. And Shostakovich in that says it's not just about that, it's about the Stalinist terror. So Ian MacDonald, a music writer, has gone through his life and work in the light of the revelations of this book, and consequently provides a very fascinating insight into Shostakovich's work. Sometimes I think he's a bit too literal. I mean, he analyzes all of his music in the light of this book, and he tends to see Stalin, in every couple of crotchets or something. But and I think there is such a thing as pure music, which rather than just program music. He wasn't just writing for a sort of film of his life. But nonetheless, it's a much needed, I think, new biography of Shostakovich, because there isn't one, an up-to-date biography of Shostakovich, surprisingly. And I think more and more as we live in these times with all these changes in Russia and Eastern Europe, Shostakovich will come to be seen as one of the most, if not the most, kind of crucial artist of the 20th century, someone who lived through this incredible experience of Stalinism and survived and managed to put it in his work.
Do you go round in the circle of looking at that book, checking back with the testimony, and indeed listening to the symphonies? I mean, it seems to me you're getting very obsessive about Shostakovich.
I have been a bit obsessive about it recently. Yes, well, I've just been listening to the music. I haven't read that again. And he quotes the testimony a lot in this book. Yes, but it's interesting to get into a composer's work to that level, because you just understand it more. And I have no training in classical music. So when he writes about the pure musical form, I mean, I kind of learn a bit about it, but some of it is a bit beyond me. But it certainly helps you to appreciate the music when you know what inspired someone to write something.
And do you attack a subject like that, reading-wise?
I do sometimes, yeah. Shostakovich is the most recent one. I've always been interested in the Stalinist period since I was a boy for some reason. I picked up a book at a jumble sale about the Russian Revolution, and since then it's always interested me. And I think the way we've reacted in the West to the Russian Revolution and to the Soviet Union has been incredible, because if you think about it, they've liberated themselves. I mean, the West has been particularly, liberal intellectuals or liberal people, kind of like ourselves maybe, have always been prepared to give communism the benefit of the doubt and think that, Stalin still had great achievements.
Yes, I mean, were you aware of it's more layers come off of how frightful it all was. Were you aware of that?
I think one was, because of reading, if you read like Robert Conquest's books about the Great Terror, it's just astonishing that the number of people that were killed in Russia. You're talking tens of millions of people. Stalin in one day signing 3,000 death warrants. It's almost unimaginable, actually, the horror of it all. And this, to me, is what makes Shostakovich, the horror is reflected in Shostakovich's music.
Yes, I mean, the idea of fear overwhelming everything. I mean, do you have dark fears in the middle of the night? We live in England.
Everyone has dark fears in the middle of the night, but I don't think in England you could have... the Russian poet Anna, I think she's pronounced Akhmatova, said that fear to her was the most intense and passionate experience she'd ever had, more so than love. Now, I don't think it's possible to live in Britain and experience something like that.
Of course, those experiences do make the music. Do yourself come out in your music?
Yes, it does. One's experiences of, happiness. People have often said about our records that they're not very happy and, in terms of the things we write about. Happiness is a very difficult thing to write about. There's something kind of banal about being happy. If you're happy, you're happy. In some ways, the interesting side of life is the unhappiness and the difficulties and the frustrations, and perhaps those are the things that inspire you to write music.
Neil, another book, please.
Another book, again, has a Russian setting, but it's by a writer who's more or less British anyway, William...
Is this Russia your big thing?
Gerhardy. It seems to be at the moment, doesn't it? And William Gerhardy was born in what was then St. Petersburg. Before the Russian Revolution, there was a lot of British and European industrialists and people engineers, whatever, who worked in Russia. And his family ran a factory in St. Petersburg. After the revolution, he left and came to England, and he settled down and became a celebrated writer for a short time. This is regarded as his best book, Futility. And again, I'd read about William Gerhardy, how he should be rediscovered by people, how he's no longer popular. And so I picked up this book, Futility, which has just been reissued. It's a very beautiful book. He writes in a very mannered style. And it's about a group of people in Russia before, during, and after the revolution. And they live in the future, these people. They're always waiting for this moment when they're going to get some money, they're going to sell the factory, they will get away, they will have some money. And they're always waiting for this moment. And he's in love with a girl who's one of this group. And eventually he realizes that the whole thing is futile, it's never going to happen. And the book has a very clever structure in that the first sentence of the book follows on from the last sentence of the book. He gets to the end of the story and then decides, that the only thing he can do to sort it out in his brain is to write a book about it. And so the first sentence is, and then it struck me that the only thing to do was to fit all this into a book. And that actually follows on from the last sentence of the book. So it really has a very unusual structure like that. But he writes very beautifully. I don't think it's to everyone's taste, because it's very mannered. He wrote this in the 1920s, and in a way that then probably seemed very modern, and now seems, I don't know, maybe slightly outdated to people. But I think it's very beautifully written.
As you're so interested in Russia, I mean, does this have a sort of permanent ring about it as a Russian thing?
Well, of course, I've never been to Russia, so I couldn't really generalize about, I don't know, the Russian people or something, or the people of the Soviet Union. I don't know, people do say that about Russia, that things move very slowly, and but I wouldn't really like to comment on that in that respect. But he brings it over, and these are a Russian middle class family that they, you know, their life is completely futile the way they behave.
Another not futile book.
Having bought this, this was to go on holiday actually, I bought the biography of J. Hardy by Dido Davies.
That's definitely doing the double act, isn't it?
It's another double act. I had 2 double acts on holiday. And this is often a literary biography, or a critical literary biography, can, you wish they'd get on with the story and stop analysing the books in depth. But this is a brilliant critical biography. It does analyse all the books, but also it brings out the humour and the pathos and the sadness and the frustrations of J. Hardy's life, because he was never really at home anywhere. There he was brought up and went to school in St. Petersburg. One of his sisters always lived there, in fact. He spoke Russian and English. So he was a kind of, and then after the revolution he came to live in England. Well, he was never quite at home in England, but then if he went back to Russia, he wouldn't have been quite at home in Russia either. He developed this marvellous writing style, writing, of course, in a kind of second language, which has probably got a lot to do with the way he wrote. He had success critically with his first book, Futility, and then with another book called The Polyglots. And he wrote a series of books after that, but then he stopped writing in 1939 or 1941 or something, and he lived till the 1970s. He never wrote another book, although he was always working on one.
What stopped him, if it was a
I think he was frustrated by his lack of success. In the 1920s and 30s, he was taken up by Lord Beaverbrook as the most brilliant writer in Britain, and he was quite famous in that respect. And he was always living slightly like one of his characters in the future. He was always writing to his mother saying, when the next book's a success, I'll buy you a house in France. But because the next book never is a success and he's borrowing money off someone. At the same time, his life is very, very comic. He always seems to be in these comic situations, which he can then put in his books. And Dido Davies' biography is itself an incredibly entertaining, there are moments when you burst out laughing, entertaining book. You can almost read it like a novel.
Success came to him in a big way, obviously. I mean, it's come to you in a big way. Does it haunt you at all? The burdens of success, the next album, all that sort of stuff?
As you go on, you can sort of, you can begin to feel a kind of pressure about, you know, your next record and the success of it. But, you know, it's best not really to get involved with that, because you can never make a record on the basis of this is going to be really successful. You can't, people can't do that really. You've got to make the record that you want to make. You've got to please yourself. So Chris and I really try to please ourselves and get excited by what we're doing and hope that people will then like it.
What about biographies? I mean, are the biographies of yours already done or about to happen? I mean, how did she dig up the stuff for William Gerhardy, Dido Davies?
Well, he had, you know, she had an archive of all his diaries and letters and everything he'd written to people. She got it from, I think, from where he'd lived. I think when went to university, there's all these boxes on catalogued material. Yes, which she started to kind of dig through. And one of the interesting things about it, of course, is that he knew so many famous people at the time, like Lord Beaverbrook or whoever. And so it's kind of a picture of the age as well.
One final book.
The final book is got nothing to do with Russia, and it's an excellent kind of book at bedtime, this, which is Graham Greene's May We Borrow Your Husband. Graham Greene is one of my favourite writers. I collect first editions of his work, and this is a book of short stories. I think it's subtitled And Other Comedies of the Sexual Life. And this story, Maybe Borrow Your Husband, is a hilarious story set in Antibes in France, and about two gay men are rather bored on their holiday who seduce the newly married husband of a married couple who come to stay there, who are having a very unhappy honeymoon, and for various reasons, and how that resolves itself. And it is actually hilariously funny and incredibly well observed.
And is Antibes the setting for all the short stories, or is it just...
It is, no, not for all of them, it's the setting for a lot of them. Graham Greene, I think, even now lives in Antibes, and I went there on holiday this year, and it's very well observed of Antibes. But particularly the way these two gay men set out to seduce this innocent husband, and in fact it has quite a helpful effect on the marriage in the end. And it's a very, very funny story. Graham Greene is a great writer, though, I think, in that he writes, he's very, on a basic level, easy to read, but I think I probably share some of his obsessions with Catholicism, say, for instance, in his more serious novels. And he's someone I never get bored with.
And first editions can't be very cheap. How many have you got?
I haven't counted. I have about 20. I mean, he's a prolific writer. Graham Greene's first editions aren't that expensive because I think, apart from his earlier novels, he's a popular novelist, so the first editions are quite a big edition. Therefore, you do see them around.
He divides his stuff up, he says, to entertainments and serious novels. But, I mean, you said yourself, he's serious, but he has a popular appeal.
Yes.
Do you yourself, you're in theory in the pop world, do you see a serious side to your work?
Yes, I mean, to an extent, our songs are divided up just to a certain extent to entertainments and kind of serious songs. So on our album, actually, we had a song called Shopping, which is an entertainment, but it had a serious side in that it was about the privatization of industries, which was then going on. But then we might have a song, like we had a song called King's Cross on that album, which was meant to be, which was a serious look, or a serious song about homelessness, and people being told they should move out their town to find a job, and then they come down to London, they haven't got a job. It's kind of a grim song, that, really. So we do both things, but we always have a sense of humour, so we write a song called Let's Make Lots of Money, almost deliberately, to be annoying, because it's something that pop stars aren't meant to talk about. There's a song on our new album called How Can You Expect to Be Taken Seriously, which is about being a pop star. And it's kind of, it's an entertainment.
You're doing an entertainment yourself, or is it a serious or an entertainment, a book yourself? Is this serious? Or?
Well, it's both, actually. It's called Pet Shop Boys Literally. It's written by a writer called Chris Heath, and he came on tour with us last year in the Far East and in Britain. And so it follows us around. He follows around actually literally with a notebook, and so it's what it's like being in a pop group, being on tour. But also it has interviews linked in with the text where we discuss what we think about pop music, what our motivations for what we do are. And it's quite unusual. Normally an official pop book is a bit boring, really. It's normally just full of praise, and then they made this album, they had that many platinum discs. This book is quite unusual because it's a kind of warts and all approach, in that Chris and I don't necessarily come out of it very well.
Have you censored it at all?
It's been a little bit censored, actually, but not greatly censored. I think people might be quite surprised when they read it, because we've never been a group that goes out to get a lot of publicity, and it's definitely a very candid look, at what goes on when you're in a pop group. Consequently, and also it's very funny as well. A lot of the situations are very funny, and so I think it's a good book about pop music itself.
Neil, it's been really interesting. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
By the way, Neil's new book, The Pet Shop Boys Literally, is published this week by Viking. Finally, a recap of the books by Neil Tennant's bedside. First, Testimony, the memoirs of the brilliant, tortured and much misunderstood Russian composer Dmitri Shostakovich, published by Weber and Weber. Staying with that theme, the new Shostakovich, the recently published biography by Ian MacDonald, which helps sort out some of the mysteries still left by the memoirs, published by Fourth Estate. Futility by William Gerhardy, the Russian-born Englishman who was one of the most important new novelists of the 1920s, published now in paperback by Robin Clark. And William Gerhardy, Dido Davis's biography of the writer who really failed to live up to his early promise, published by Oxford University Press. Finally, May We Borrow Your Husband, Graham Greene's quirky short stories set mainly in off-season Antibes, published by Penguin. That's all from this series of books by my bedside. I've really enjoyed talking to all our guests, and I hope you've enjoyed the programmes. Perhaps they might have given you an idea or two of books you might like by your bedside. Good night.
Studio.
And next week, comedy returns with a new series of Three's Company.
Pet Shop Boy